You for staying with Daybreak. The conversation begins right now. Let me introduce my guest one more time, starting from the upper deck. Kidi Mwaga, convener, Interparties Youth Forum. Thank you for making time. We also have Billion Ojiwa, community mobilizer. Asante sana for making time. Ruth Bolo, the chairperson, Young Women Connect. Thank you very much for making time. We also have Mohamed Abdullahi, a law student. Asante sana for making time. We have Josephine Wanjiru, youth and gender activist. Thank you very much for making time. And Patience Sau Kitty, administration manager, UDA. Thank you very much for making time. And Abdullah, I'll start with you. What do you make of the vetting process? 5 nominees have already been vetted so far.
It doesn't really, the value that we would expect out of a vetting process is not what we're getting. Really the questions seem to just be ticking boxes. I'll take the example of the net worth question. It doesn't go beyond questioning what is your net worth. There are no questions of how the person probably acquired the wealth, especially for those who have seen an increase in their wealth between the last time when they were vetted and now. So a lot of the questions, there aren't a lot of questions because a cabinet minister, really the role that they will be doing at the ministry is to guide policy. So what policy interventions will you bring into the ministry? What key contributions will you bring to the ministry? A lot of those questions are missing really. So I think there's a bit of work to be done on the side of the parliamentarians. However, on the side of the nominees, I'll pick a few responses to some of the questions which were asked. For example, to the nominee for the Cabinet Secretary for Health, one of the questions she was asked was, we all know the problems that bedevil cancer. What are you going to do about it? 2 responses. One, she says, I will try and reduce the human interaction in a lot of those activities. I'll try and instill processes and procedures which limit the human interaction. I'll digitize majority of them. I strongly think majority of those have been done. However, fair enough response. But the second one gets interesting. She says, I'll be inviting external auditors time and again to come and audit the books of KEMSA. This is someone who's being proposed for the Minister of Health of this country. And it begs the question, lady, ever heard of the Office of the Auditor General? That is really their work. So if basic questions like those cannot be answered. Another question she's asked is, what is the doctor-to-patient ratio to this country? After a lengthy response going around that we're doing well, we are okay, we are better than some countries, the question is repeated. Just give us the number. And she goes back to her response is, I will get back to you on that. If you don't have the number, how do you know that we're doing well? If you don't have the number, how do you know that we're doing better than other countries? So I think a lot of them, similarly to the outgoing, or at least to the dismissed Cabinet Secretary for Health, who faced a lot of Kenyans' wrath, I do not think the current nominee will be any different. And that applies for a majority of those other positions as well.
Okay. Patience, are they just ticking the boxes or do you have a different view?
Trevor, thank you so much for this particular opportunity. But before I respond to your question, allow me to introduce myself in the best way that I can. As the saying goes, that whenever you are writing your own history, do not allow somebody else to hold the pen. I'm Patience Kitty, the manager at the Secretary General office, serving the administrative functions within that office. I'm also a registered member of UDA party. And thirdly, I was a UDA candidate vying for a member of County Assembly in Weruga Ward in Taita Taveta. My response to your question is that personally, as an individual, I feel that the Cabinet Secretary nominees answered satisfactorily the questions that they were asked by the Committee of Parliament. I know there is the vast experience that each and every nominee was carrying. There are people who already been in the cabinet before, like Honorable Kindure Kindiki. There are people who are also coming from the aspect of not working with the government before, like the CS nominee of health. And to my understanding, I think she represented us well. She was able to answer all the questions well. as per her knowledge. Remember, this is a government entity that she is coming into. She has been working with NGOs previously, and she wants to put the best practices that she has borrowed a leaf from to bring into the government. So I feel the cabinet nominees for yesterday, they did quite a good job, and it's good that we give accolades where it's deserved, and let's give them time to see what they were able to implement. It's too early for us to judge them.
Okay.
Yes.
Josephine?
Thank you so much, Trevor, for inviting me once more to this panel, and I'm happy to be here on Daybreak. So on to the vetting process. I'd like to echo some of what both my colleagues have said, but give my opinions on it. I believe that, first of all, the parliamentarians actually did a great job in putting these people in the hot seat. Take, for example, the question that was asked to Professor Kithure Kindiki on what he'd do about police brutality, considering that a lot of brutality has happened in the time that he's been in office. What would change now that he has been reappointed, or whether he would have been noble of him to bow down like the IG would have. I feel like the parliamentarians did a good job by asking them relevant questions to their sectors, and not solely focusing on their personal lives. So on the parliamentarians, I hope to see the same today. That was the first phase. And on the nominee side, I feel like they did, as my colleague said, they did the best to answer their questions to the best of their knowledge. Take, for example, the question on Linda Mama and the CHIF and all the kind of policies that these people are to implement. Because a lot of people are bashing, for example, the outgoing interior CS and now reappointed on stories on police brutality. And as my colleague said, their job is to implement policies, not to, govern their behaviors. That's the work of the IPOA and what have you. So they did their best in their abilities, talked about the policies they would implement, talked about the country's way forward. And so I am happy with this vetting process. And I'm also thankful that the citizens are participating and following through with how these vetting processes are done.
Okay. Kidi, what do you make of the vetting process?
Thank you, Trevor. As someone who has the privilege of working with young people from across the political divide, the least I can give the people of Kenya this morning is objectivity. I had a chance of watching the vetting on day one, and I must tell the people of Kenya that in my own assessment, the vetting was below par, because it seemed that the panel allowed the nominees to dance around questions and get away with it. When you talk about when you have offered yourself as a nominee to serve the people of Kenya at the level of cabinet, I think one of the basic things we should be able to demand, and legitimately so, is that some of these nominees should be able to waive their right to privacy, because now they become the property of the people of Kenya. And the people of Kenya deserve to know that if you say that in the last 121 months, your net worth has shot up by 150 million, then at least you should, at the very least, you should go ahead and tell us how you have been able to amass so much within such a short period, how the grace of God has been so good upon you, while so many Kenyans have been struggling. I will tell you, my brother Trevor, that in the last 21 months, a lot of SMEs have gone belly up, have collapsed. Household spending has reduced significantly because people are unable to afford the basics. So then, if the grace of God is so good on people we put in positions of responsibility, at the very least, the vetting committee should insist that at least bring us more evidence. Secondly, I looked at when some of the nominees were speaking about their portfolios, and one thing that was painfully lacking was domain knowledge. So going forward from today to Sunday, we will insist that the vetting process, at least the nominees should and must demonstrate domain knowledge of the portfolios they are going to. If you are coming to Ministry of Mining, for instance, tell us things about maritime affairs. Tell us the initiatives you're going to put in place to make sure that Kenyans are able to tap into the blue economy. So to this extent, I must say that I felt the vetting was below par. Thank you.
Bolo?
I absolutely agree with Kidi. In fact, I feel like the way it was conducted, it was for the sake of saying, you know, we've done it. I would have wanted to hear some assimilation exercises, give them situations, you know, put them in situations of strikes or challenges that have been happening in the country in the past, see what their responses to those particular issues would have been. Because in as much as the CSAs are then supposed to direct policy, there's a humane touch of it. And that is one of the issues that people are having with the former CS, Susan Nakhumicha, because of her utterances. So there's that humane side to it that young people want to see and say, this is someone who, one, relates to our lived experiences. This is someone who too has been watching the kind of situations that are in the country, and they have solutions to them. So I would have wanted to hear a bit of that. I would also have wanted to see more questions from the public incorporated. And one of my biggest issues has always been that when it comes to campaign, then we always want to go speak to the Mama Mboga, we want to talk to the boda group, we want to talk to the young people, we want to talk to the chamas. But when it comes to the governing of the country, then we want to tick boxes. So I would have wanted to hear a bit more incorporated from the public. And finally, what I saw when they were discussing the net worth just shook me as a young person. And I was asking myself, hey, so does this mean that if I want my net worth to grow, then maybe I should consider aligning myself to joining government at a certain position, because then that is where the money is. And it also makes me ask, I am being pushed to pay taxes. When I work into certain hospitals, the situation is very dire, but there is some, you know, there's that public perception that is giving, yes, that is now not hindering, but it is not motivating you from paying taxes. It is not motivating you from even giving them a chance, because you already have a perception that this is what is happening. So I would have wanted to hear a bit more about that particular growth, because it is looking, you know, it's not realistic. It's looking very, very unrealistic, and it's making me question a lot of things.
Okay. Billion?
Thank you, Trevor. First of all, I think we should know why or how we got here. I think, you know, there's a reason why we have this vetting now, why we have the new cabinet now. And it was an opportunity for Parliament to redeem itself. And it's also the first time that everybody is following the vetting process. The other vetting processes, we've just been, you know, ticking and moving. There's some of the things, I know the nominees expected the reaction from the public, but also what would have been, those who would have redeemed them were the members of Parliament. If you look at the petitions, there were petitions from the public that, you know, none of them was touched on. And those are the things why we are saying maybe there was a briefing of these are the questions we are going to ask you, because if you look at most of the nominees, they were referring to their files. It looked like they already had answers to some of the questions that were being asked. So hopefully, you know, from the public, the criticism that they saw last evening and the reaction from all of us, maybe they will do better today. And looking at you know, the net worth, you know, young people are just following. They're looking at, you know, they've been saying, you know, the economy is not doing well, things are not stable. But if you look at the people who are in those spaces that are guarded, that are young people are not let into those spaces, are doing pretty well. So hopefully we get to see a lot more. We didn't even see how much they've been contributing in terms of tax. Yeah, so we expected more grilling. We expected a serious, thorough grilling, but we didn't. What we saw was 30% of what we expected. Okay.
Yeah. All right. I'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll still continue with that conversation on vetting, and then we'll talk about a bit of politics as well and the state of the nation in just a bit. Keep your views coming at Trevor Mbidi at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Citizen Daybreak. See you in just a bit.